Now, I'd like to read a piece of prose that, again, using some great writer's phrase, a piece of work in progress. And this is part of a short story. It's going to be a fairly long story. I'm trying to avoid the word novel, called Adventures in the Skin Trade. And this little bit begins when a young man comes to London for the first time and goes into the bar of Paddington Station. Nip of bass, please, and a ham sandwich. He took them to a table in a corner, brushed off the crumbs with his wet hat, and sat down just before noon. He counted his money. £8, 9 and a penny, nearly £3 more than he'd ever had in his life. Some people had this every week. It had to last him until he was dead. At the next table sat a plump, middle-aged man with a chocolate brown birthmark over his cheek and chin like the half of a beard. He was propping his book against an empty bottle when a young man walked over to him from the counter. "Hello, Sam." "Hello, Ron. Fancy seeing you." He was Ronald Bishop, who used to live in the Crescent off Stanley's Grove. "Been up on a smoke for long, Sam?" "Oh, just arrived. How's tracks?" "Oh, same as me. We must be in the same train." "Oh, so. Still at the old same game, Sam?" "Yes, up in the business." "You at the usual?" "Yeah." They had never had anything to say to each other. "Where you staying, Ron?" "Oh, usual, Strand Palace." "Oh, that's I'll be seeing you then." "Okay. Make it tomorrow in the bar about 7:30. "Okay. It's a date, don't forget." "No fear." They both forgot it at once. "Well, I'll be seeing you. Be good." As Ronald Bishop walked off, Samuel said silently into his glass, "A fine beginning." If I go out of the station and turn round the corner, I'll be back in number 42. The little Proberts will be playing doctors outside the load of hay. The only stranger anywhere near me is a businessman with a stained face reading the palms of his hands. No, here comes a woman in a fur coat. She's going to sit next to me. Yes, no. I smelt her as she passed. Eau de cologne and powder and bed. The woman sat down 2 tables away, crossed her legs, powdered her nose. This is the beginning of an advance. Now she is pretending not to notice that her knees are uncovered. "There's a lynx in the room, lady. Button your overcoat." She's rattling her spoon and her saucer to attract my attention, but when I stare at her hard without smiling, I see she is looking down gently and innocently into her lap as though she had a baby there. He was glad she was not brazen. "Dear Mother," he wrote with his finger on the back of an envelope, looking up between every few invisible words at the unnoticing woman opposite. "This is to tell you that I arrived safe and that I am drinking in the buffet with a tart. I will tell you later if she is Irish. She is about 38 years old, and her husband left her 5 years ago because of her carryings on. Her child is in a home, and she visits him every other Sunday. She always tells him that she is working in a hat shop. You need not worry that she will take all my money, as we loved each other on first sight. And you need not worry that I shall break my heart trying to reform her, because I have always been brought up to believe that Mortimer Street, where I was born, is what is right, and I would not wish that on anybody. Besides, I do not want to reform her. Not that I think she is nasty. Her business is very hard on stockings, so I'm going to pay the first week's rent for our little room in Pimlico. Now she is going across to the counter to buy another cup of coffee. I hope you will notice that she is buying her own. Everybody in the buffet is unhappy except me. As she came back to her table, he tore up the envelope and stared at her unsmiling for a full minute by the Bovril clock. Once she raised her eyes to his, then looked away. She was tapping her spoon on the side of her cup, then opening and closing the clasp of her handbag, then turning her head round slowly to face him, and then looking again away quickly through the window. She must be new, he thought with a sudden compassion, but he did not stop staring. Should I wink? He tilted his hard, wet hat over one eye and winked. A long, deliberate wink that screwed up his face and made his burning cigarette nearly touch the blunt end of his nose. She snapped her handbag, pushed 2 pennies under the saucer, and walked right out of the room, never looking at him as she passed. She's left her coffee, he thought, and then, my God, she was blushing. A fine beginning. Did you speak? Asked the man with the birthmark, spying up. His face was red and purple where it wasn't brown, faintly shabby and unshaved, shiftily angry about the eyes, as though his cunning were an irritation impossible to bear. I think I said it was a fine day. Stranger in town? Yes, I've just come up. How'd you like it? He did not appear to care at all. I haven't been outside the station yet. Now, the woman in the fur coat would be telling a policeman, I have just been winked at by a short boy wearing a wet hat. But it isn't raining, madam. That would settle her. He put his hat under the table. There's plenty to see, the man said, if that's what you want. Museums, art galleries. Without speaking, he went through a list of other attractions. Museums, he said after a long pause. There's one at South Kensington, and there's a British Museum, and there's one at Whitehall with guns. I've seen them all, he said. Now every table was occupied. Cold, stiff people with time to kill sat staring at their tea and the clock, inventing replies to questions that would not be asked, justifying their behavior in the past and the future, drowning every present moment as soon as it began to breathe, lying and wishing, missing all the trains and the terrors of their minds, lone at the terminus. Time was dying all over the room. And then all the tables except the one next to Samuel's were unoccupied again. The lonely crowd went out in a funeral procession, leaving ash and tea leaves and newspapers. You must move out of a station sometimes, you know, the man said, returning to a conversation that had no interest to him, if you want to see around. It's only fair. It's not fair to come up in a train and sit in a buffet and then go back and say you've seen London, is it? I'm going out now, quite soon. That's right, man said. Give London a chance. He is so tired of talking to me that he is nearly losing his temper, Samuel thought. He looked around him again, at the mourners fidgeting to the counter, at the quick whiskey drinkers in a knot by the tea urn, at the waitresses listlessly busy with cardboard cakes and small change. Otherwise, it's like not getting out of bed, isn't it? The man said. You've got to walk around, you know. You've got to move around sometime.